What is going on, everybody? Welcome into the Diehard MMA podcast brought to you by odds.com. It's your boy Clint coming to you for another breakdown video. How is everybody doing today? Give me a second here to go ahead and welcome in the chat. We've got people already piling up. It is gonna be a good one. Can you believe it's already Monday again? It feels like just a couple days ago we were complaining about how it wasn't fight week and we didn't have an event this week to talk about. And here we are. It's fight week again, folks. Let's go. What is up? We've got Nevin, JR MMA, Mark, Ryan. Everyone's starting to pile in here. We'll give it a second. I'm going to go ahead and bring in my guest. I've got a special guest this week. We are joined by my guy, James Lynch, coming in here, Lynch on Sports. He's one of my absolute favorite people to listen to. I'm a podcast fan myself, first and foremost, so this is kind of awesome and surreal for me to have him on my own show. How you doing, James? Welcome to the Diehard MMA podcast. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me, man. I'm looking forward to this. We've been trying to link this up for a while. Glad it all came together and it could happen here tonight. Happy to talk some fights with you, man.
For sure. I am super excited and ready to go on this one. So a lot of people piling in here may not realize, UFC 251 is coming up this weekend. We actually both have already broken down UFC 251. I did a live stream last week for that one and gave all my, betting action picks and stuff like that on that. You did a live stream earlier today for that, correct?
I did, yes. Top to bottom, went through the odds, and obviously with the change in the main event, was able to break that down as well. So, yeah, all up to date now. We're everyone should know my picks. They're all out there on my personal channel, youtube.com/lynchonsports.
Sounds like a plan. Everybody go check that out. If you still need your 251 action, we're both up and ready to go. So this week we're going to be doing, I believe it's hashtag UFC Fight Island 1. Is that what they're calling
This is what I'm trying to figure out. I don't even know, because technically this is the first Fight Island card coming up on Saturday, which is 251. So I would think the hashtag would be UFC 251 and then also UFC Fight Island. I would think this is Fight Island 2, but I have no idea. I don't know the rules. I just know it's on Fight Island and it's on July 15th. So that's all I know.
I am right there with you. I'm not sure what to tag my tweets because I've already put out one or two picks for this card, and I don't know what to tag it under because it's either 251 and Fight Island or it's Fight Island 1, and then this week will be Fight Island 2. I have no idea. It's Wednesday. It's going to be on 7/15, and I got to tell you, as a gambling degenerate and as a UFC fan, I am so stoked to have a card midweek like that to get us between the two Saturday events. Other sports have it good, man. When they get baseball every single day, when they get hockey every, 6 nights a week, something like that. As MMA people, it is hard to go an entire week and then sometimes skip 2 or even 3 weeks in a row before we get an event. I'm loving it.
Yeah, me too. It's nice to have a little bit of variety in there too. I also like the morning cards every now and then, but this is good, and I think it's good for these fighters as well that they're able to do another card in between there because, of course, COVID delayed everything, so all the fighters are getting their fights in and no one's without a paycheck. So it's good news for everyone.
Absolutely, I completely agree. So let's not drag too much further on. We got a card to break down. Let's go ahead and dive on into it. First things first, you may notice the podcast is not on my YouTube channel anymore. It is exclusively on Odds HQ. That's a new deal, and both of us are going to be providing content for Odds HQ going forward. I do need to shout out my sponsors, the boys over at GoatCapitalSports.com. They have been absolutely crushing it with soccer. So if you're into just gambling like a degenerate on a daily basis, kind of like I am, they're giving out soccer plays, and they're going to do baseball, basketball, all that other stuff when those sports return. They're on an 8-1 run on free plays. So give them a follow over on Twitter. First fight of the night, we've got Diana Belbita taking on Liana Jojua, and I am extremely excited to announce that Liana Jojua followed me on Instagram today. So
big deal.
Big ups for your boy here. This one's interesting. Usually I kind of skate over the first couple of events of the evening, especially if I don't have a good solid read on it, and that's kind of what I have to do here. We've got a 13-5 fighter taking on a 7-3 fighter. Most of the fans here on the Die Hard podcast know women's records don't tend to be what the men's are because they kind of hit that ceiling. They hit that UFC level a whole lot faster than the men do because there's just not as much talent. So we can kind of throw the bad records out the window. That doesn't mean they're bad fighters. Diana seems to be aggressive. She's got good hard leg kicks. I like seeing that. She does a decent job of counter striking. And the favorite thing that I noticed watching tape of her is she has these huge knees in the clinch and absolutely hammers her opponents with those things. Go into the body, go into the head. She controls her opponents well up against the cage. Liana Jojua, she's very green, I guess is the best way to put it. In her last fight, it really looked like the UFC was looking to spotlight her the last time they went out to Abu Dhabi with a fight against Sarah Cheesecake Moraz, who was on, I think, a 3-fight losing streak at the time, and she ended up getting TKO'd. She just looked really kind of out of her element there, almost deer in the headlights a little bit. She seems to be relatively decent at jiu-jitsu, but because of that, she accepts bottom position. She goes to her back. She's comfortable there, which in MMA, the judges tend to think that you're losing unless you end up actually getting that submission finish. So I kind of got to lean with Belbita on this one, except I don't really feel comfortable looking at the betting lines. We have got, I've lost my place here over on Bet MMA Tips. They've got this event all out of order here, which throws me for a loop. Belbita's a -160 favorite with the comeback +140 on Jojua. And I don't like laying that kind of a price with a relatively untested female fighter. What are you feeling like on this one?
Yeah, this is a difficult fight to pick. It's a case of the UFC matching up two prospects in the flyweight division. We know the flyweight division, they need some new talent. They need to get someone to eventually challenge Valentina Shevchenko, like legit, like someone that can actually give her a test. I think they're looking for a diamond in the rough here. You got a pair of 20-year-olds, Belbita, I should say, is 24. Her opponent is 25. So they're really hoping to find sort of the next big thing in that division. That's how I sort of look at this matchup, trying to see who the better prospect is. Both coming off losses. Belbita coming off that loss to Molly McCann. I was actually at that fight that was in Boston, and that was a fight. I mean, that's a tough debut fighting Meatball Molly, a former Cage Warriors champion. I mean, it doesn't get any tougher than that. But again, it's a case of two women as well who didn't really fight a lot of tough competition on the regional scene. The girl that Belbita beat to get in the UFC was a girl who was 1-2. That's just like unheard of. But in the women's divisions, like you mentioned, a lot of them don't fight really tough competition. Of course, she comes from Romania, fighting mainly in the RXF promotion, which is just promotion out there where they put on a lot of fights, but the level of competition just isn't the same. So she didn't get finished in that fight. She obviously lost, but I don't think she looked terrible. It's kind of trying to figure out who has the better upside here. And to me, losing to Sarah Morris as opposed to losing to Molly McCann, to me, is a worse loss, in my opinion. That's sort of how I look at this fight. Now, another thing with Belbita, I'm from Canada. She's got some Canadian roots here. She actually trains with Kyle Nelson, if you know UFC featherweight, because
Kyle Nelson.
Yeah, well, Kyle's coach is Romanian, Crew Aline. He's someone that has a lot of connections to a lot of the Romanian fighters. So she's actually been training with Kyle, I know, for her last couple camps. I believe Kyle is in Vegas now because I know his teammate is going to be fighting soon here on the UFC. So she's been getting some good work. And I mean, Kyle's a good training partner. He has a good sort of camp there. But this is one of those fights that I always warn people with where there just isn't a lot of evidence to show there's a clear-cut winner here. I think they're both very green, like you mentioned. I give a slight edge to Belbita just because of the fact that I think she's training with better people. I think that you talked about some of the advantages she has in terms of her skill set. I think there are some advantages there as well. But in general, I would just stay away from this fight. I think the UFC is also trying to figure out who the better prospect is, like I said. So both very young, both very green. I'll go Belbita here, but I don't feel confident laying any money on this fight just because I think both are we still have too many question marks about both heading into the fight.
Yeah, man, I completely agree. I couldn't say it better. And especially in this kind of a spot where if I like the favorite and the line is too wide for me, I don't want to lay that kind of juice. It's just a complete easy stay away pass, a fireball and popcorn fight, if you will. That's what we like to say here on the podcast. You do a shot of fireball, sit down with your bowl of popcorn and just enjoy it.
Yeah, exactly.
I'll be interested to see who comes out on top on this one for sure. So our next fight of the night, we've got Tim Elliott taking on Ryan Benoit, and this one is really fun to me. So Tim Elliott is hitting that 500 mark in his record, which you never want to see in the UFC. He's 16-11, and then he's got Ryan Benoit, who's kind of getting close to that himself at 10-6. Now, Tim Elliott's a decent chunk older than Ryan. Ryan seemed like a really hot prospect. He kind of stormed onto the scene. Second fight, knocks out Sergio Pettis. Everyone kind of thought he was going to go, skyrocket after that point. But he's alternated wins and losses ever since that spot. And really, if history tells us anything, he should win this fight because he's coming off of a loss. Tim Elliott, this is going to be his third fight in 2020 so far. Another real quick turnaround for him. And we've been looking at potentially fading fighters that are doing that, especially with the COVID situation. You're not really getting your best training. Some of your training partners may not be in line. Everything's really uncertain right now. And I feel like Tim Elliott may be on the decline a little bit. So a quick turnaround plus that makes me really stray away from him. I've been looking to kind of fade him when it comes to a sports betting perspective. I'm a fan of him as a person, but when it comes to trying to make money, he's one to really easily go against at this point. But you got to address how good he is when he's on point. I mean, he's got that zombie thing where it doesn't matter how much damage he takes, he will just stalk forward and come after you. I mean, his fight with who was the new Russian kid? It wasn't
Askarov.
Askarov, thank you very much. When he fought Askarov, I mean, in round 3, he just dropped his hands and started stomping forward, and he was taking some shots. The fact that he was able to walk through that and keep coming, his durability is still intact. His real weakness is the submission game. So if you can out-scramble him and catch him in something, that's where Tim Elliott kind of gets caught. But if you can't do that, he's still kind of a problem. And Ryan Benoit has struggled on the mat, historically speaking. He's struggled with people who have been able to take him down. And that chain grappling offense is all that Tim Elliott really brings to the table. So I kind of lean Tim Elliott here. I'm very tempted to take kind of a buy low position on Tim Elliott. He's about a minus 115 favorite to plus 100 or minus 105 on Benoit. And Benoit's really only got those power shots from the left side. Big left body kick, big left hook. But I feel like he might be a fish out of water on the ground here with Tim. What do you think?
Really interesting matchup. A couple things about Tim Elliott. He's actually not in Vegas training for this camp. He went back to Missouri, his old gym, Glory MMA and Fitness, with the likes of James Krause and Megan Anderson and Grant Dawson, who's got a fight coming up here soon. So I think that's actually a good move for him, where he's back with his old team, going back to his own roots. He needs to win this fight. It's 3 in a row. A lot of fighters don't get that other opportunity when they've lost 3 in a row. So the fact that Elliott has another chance here, that could be a dangerous thing for Ryan Benoit, Benoit, just because of the fact that he's a guy that has nothing to lose, right? Like, this is his last shot. This is his second tour in the UFC. If you remember, he got cut the first time, went on the Ultimate Fighter, got signed again. I mean, it's now or never. He's 33, but the chance of him getting back in the UFC, especially in the flyweight division, which they're not really that amped on these days, I think really shows a lot here. So Tim's got the pressure coming to him. What do we know about Tim Elliott? You kind of mentioned it there. He has these lapses where he ends up getting submitted, like with Brandon Royval. He was favored in that fight, looked good, but he just made a mistake, got submitted. Same thing happened against Davidson Figueiredo. So he's a guy that, and Ben Nguyen is another example. That's a fight he should have won. He didn't, right? So if you look at Ryan Benoit, he's a guy that, or Benoit, I should say. I keep saying Benoit. I think of the wrestler by accident. But you have to go all the way back to October of 2013, the last time Ryan Benoit had a submission victory. So Tim doesn't really have to worry about that in this fight. So as long as he avoids the submission, if you look at what Tim brings to the table, I mean, this is a guy that has been battle tested. He's fought Demetrius Johnson. He's fought really high level competition. Benoit is a guy that his best win is Sergio Pettis. That's also probably the best opponent he's fought too. If you're looking down the list of guys that he's fought, Brandon Moreno is another one, but still, if you look at the level of competition, Tim Elliott's fought a lot better competition in this one. I think with the fact his back's against the wall here, I think with the fact that he's fighting a guy that isn't a submission ace, a guy that likes to stand and trade, I think Elliott pulls this one off. I think he puts on a really good performance. I think he bounces back here. I don't think he finishes Ryan Benoit in this fight, but I do see him potentially getting a decision in this one as he looks to sort of play it safe, but also look at getting the victory here. I think that's a safe bet as far as that goes. And one other thing I'll mention, just the level of activity. Elliott has fought a lot more. I know that he had that layoff in between. I think it was 2018. He missed all of 2018 because he was injured. But you look at Ryan Benoit, he's a guy that missed almost 3 years. He fought in 2017. He had all of 2018 off as well. But just in general, he just has not fought a lot over the last couple of years. Elliott's got, I think, 27 fights total. I got to favor the vet here. I'm going to go Tim Elliott, either by decision or potentially a later stoppage, maybe second or third round.
All right. I'm glad to hear we agree on that one. And the point of him going back to his home gym, training with James Krause and stuff like that, that's something that I didn't realize. So I'm happy to hear that. And that pushes me even more towards taking him. And that's an angle that I've really been, working on lately, is these buy low spots on athletes that aren't quite done yet. Everyone in the public, the fans, they're all ready to bury these guys, but they've still got enough juice left in them. The reason you think they're done is because they're stepping down from facing the best. And that's what's happening here with Tim. I mean, his losses were to Askarov, who I'm extremely high on, and then Davison Figueiredo, who's challenging for the title and is the uncrowned king after having the strange fight with Joe Benavidez last time out, and then submission ace Brandon Royval. And we know that's his Achilles heel. So I'm with you. I'm totally with you, and I actually think I'm going to end up locking in that bet right after the show. Haven't made it official, but it's going to be.
Absolutely.
I want to give a quick shout out to the chat one more time because we've got 94 people tuning in live here. Thank you all very much for joining us today. I appreciate you all for jumping in. We love having you here at odds.com. Here is an interesting one coming up. John Phillips taking on Dusko Todorovic. Am I saying that right?
I believe so. Yeah. You said it better than I would have. So good on you.
All right. I struggle so bad with some of these last names, man. So John Phillips is one of those weird middle of the road fighters that's been really tough to get a read on so far in the UFC. He's had a little bit of a rough go of it. He is 22-9, taking on the newcomer who is 9-0, undefeated, making his UFC debut. Now, John just recently bounced back with a big KO win over Alan Amedovski, which is a fight that I essentially buried him in. I was not expecting him to be able to win that fight. And kind of taking a look back at his career so far in the UFC, the issue's really been the grappling. He got submitted twice, and then he had a real close fight with Jack Marshman. And if you can't take this guy down, he is a problem on the feet. Very heavy hands, good forward pressure. If he forces a brawl, that's really where he can thrive, I feel like. He wings these huge power hooks, and he's got heavy low kicks. He is super durable. I've seen him get hurt and dig deep a couple of times to kind of work his way through that and stay in a fight. The only issue really, like I said, is on the mat. Now, looking into Dusko, it was kind of hard to find this kid because it's always tough digging up tape on regional scene fighters or guys that aren't quite in the UFC yet. But this guy, it seems like he's got a pretty decent following. People seem to be relatively high on him. He comes to us from the Contender Series, which that's always, the UFC is kind of putting their mark on the fighters coming through there. He's got good head movement. He strikes well from range. He's also a pressure fighter, especially if he gets you up against the cage. He's got really good use of underhooks and kind of pins you up against the fence. He covers up well when his opponents are coming back at him, and he's got good knees, good body work in the clinch. But what I really noticed is he drops his hands moving backwards. He's got that kind of tall man defense that he'll just kind of pull back and expect to slip away from that punch. And he does also tend to gas out if he doesn't get his opponents out of there early. So early thoughts on this one for me, I'm very tempted to bet the dog here. Talk to me, man. What are you seeing on this one?
Yeah, 100% the value here is on the underdog. If you look at the experience heading into this one, Todorovic only has 9 fights, right? He's fighting a guy who has, almost 31 fights as far as his career goes. So that's a huge gap in experience. And you look at who he's fought as well. I'm a big person on this, like Marshman, Kevin Holland, Charles Bird. Those are all decent competition as far as that goes. Let's not forget that Todorovic hasn't fought since Contender Series back in July. He fought a really tough guy, someone I'm very familiar with, in Teddy Ash, who's a teammate of Tanner Bozer's. That was a really good fight, close fight though. Wasn't a clear-cut, dominant performance. I mean, Teddy had his moments in that fight, but Todorovic looked good in that one. What this really comes down to is the UFC's taking sort of an aging veteran. I hate to call Phillips a veteran at this point. But he is 35. He's fighting a guy who's 26 years old. So it's one of those cases as, does Phillips have anything left in his career at this point? Does he have enough to beat a guy that he's well more experienced with? I think he can. I think there is some value here. And I think he's a guy, too, that knows that he's probably not going to get many more chances in the UFC, despite the fact he's a guy that trains at SBG, right? He's a guy that obviously they like to keep those guys around a little bit longer here. But you did point out some of the skill sets here. I think this is one of those cases where I think I'll pick the youngster. I think the UFC knows what they're doing here. I think they're taking a prospect and trying to build him off of a veteran who's had some rough goes of it in the UFC. But if I'm looking to bet this fight and just looking at the line right now, like we're sort of talking about it here. I mean, you've got an opponent here in John Phillips who's, if that creeps up to plus 200, I don't see how you can't take that. I mean, here's a guy that makes his fights tough. You talked about the Jack Marshman fight. That was a split decision. That was a fight where, he was in it. And I mean, Jack Marshman's sort of a middle of the road type middleweight. So I don't think you can take, I think you can take a lot away from that as far as who he's fought or whatever. So I'm going to go kind of, I know people don't like me when I say this, but I'm going to go, obviously going to pick the prospect here. But if you're going to bet this fight, I think the value is absolutely on Phillips, just with what he brings to the table and the wealth of experience he has over his opponent.
I completely agree. And honestly, you nailed it on the head as far as saying that if it gets up to plus 200, that's where I'm at. The very first thing I noticed on this card when I started researching it was I think I want to bet Jack. And I'm sorry, John. I'm thinking about Jack Marshman now. So I think I want to go ahead and bet John here. And I think the money is going to come in kind of like you said on his opponent here. Everyone's going to see that 9-0. Everyone's going to see that he's, 1-3 in his last 4 fights in the UFC. But the thing is, I'm not convinced that Todorovic has the submission game or the grappling game that it's going to take to put this guy away. And that means we've got a 15-minute fight on the feet. And if he slows down in round 2 or round 3, we've got a vet here who carries his power late and can easily have a comeback with a big knockout later on in this fight if he doesn't get it early, because this kid's willing to scrap with him. So I'm very tempted to take that shot. I'm going to sit tight. I'm going to be patient, see where that line goes. And if we do get up around plus 200 for sure, I think I'll be taking that shot. Everybody in the chat, we hit 104. Thank you very much for hanging out with us today. We are breaking down Wednesday's fight card, UFC Fight Island 1, we believe, Kattar versus Ige, happening on the 15th next week. Do us a favor, if you're on Twitter, hit the retweet button so we get the word out there about the show going live this week. We would very much appreciate it. Moving on, our next fight here is Ricardo Ramos taking on Lauren. I think it's Lauren, isn't it? Lerone Murphy?
Lerone Murphy, I think is how you say it. I think.
Murphy.
Could be wrong. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. I appreciate the assist.
No worries.
So Ricardo, this guy, man, I've been high on Ramos for a long time. I feel like everybody kind of has, but I feel like the UFC is kind of doing what they did with Luis Pena a couple of weeks ago, where they're kind of stringing him along. They're giving him winnable fights, new UFC opponents, people that are only 1 or 2 fights in their UFC career, just kind of trying to give him time to build and develop. And what I had some success with, especially with Luis Pena, we put a big, heavy bet against him with Kama, the Death Star Worthy, and took the opportunity to cash him when the right opponent came against Pena that was going to be able to, I don't know, kind of bring out some of the holes in his game that the hand-picked opponents hadn't been able to just yet. And I've kind of got that itchy feeling a little bit here on this one. Murphy's 8-0, undefeated coming into the UFC, and I feel like this is put up or shut up time for Ramos. I don't think they're going to be spoon-feeding him here, because Murphy seems like a guy they would want to get behind. This is strange matchmaking to me if you're trying to build one of these fighters. You know what I mean?
Yes, absolutely. Well, a couple things I wanted to point out here with Ramos. Let's not forget, he used to fight at bantamweight, right? He had that big win over Ayman Zahabi. That's sort of what made his mark, because Zahabi, obviously, with his last name and coming from Canada, they're always looking to build up more fighters. That was a big win for him at the time. He actually finished him in the 3rd round with that really impressive spinning back elbow. Had the split decision win over Kung Ho Kang, but lost to Sadnir Magomedov, which, again, it was one of those cases where they're putting 2 prospects against each other. Magomedov ended up coming out on top. He actually got finished in the 1st round. That prompted a move for him, 2 fights later, I should say, up to featherweight, because that's something to keep in mind here. Now, if you remember, he was supposed to fight Sergio Pettis on UFC on ESPN3 back in June of last year. Pettis actually had to bow out of that due to an injury, so insert Journey Newsom, and ends up beating Journey Newsom, but still continued getting back on the winning track. And then obviously his last fight he won as well, which was at featherweight, and his first featherweight fight in the UFC. Got that quick rear naked choke in the 1st round. So I agree with you. I think what they're doing is they're trying to figure out who's a good international fighter here as far as the featherweight division goes. Both these guys relatively young. Ramos, 24 years old. Murphy is 28 years old. So they're both haven't hit that age 30 yet. They're both not in their prime yet, so to speak. I like Ramos a lot better at 145. I think he was cutting too much weight heading down there. And he's just got a lot more experience here. 16 fights compared to just 9 for Lerone Murphy. But Murphy's a guy as well that, fought a lot on the UK scene, had some good opponents on the regional scene as well. I remember there was a guy that he fought that was 7-1, and then he fought a guy who was 8-3 to actually get in the UFC. And obviously his last fight ended up being a split draw against Tukagov, who's a teammate of Khabib Nurmagomedov. So Murphy, obviously, coming into this one, looking to prove himself. Ramos, the same thing. I kind of give the slight edge to Ramos just because he's been a little bit more battle tested in the UFC as far as opponents. I think he's found his stride after losing that fight to Sadnir Magomedov. And I think what it really comes down to is, can he find the old form that we used to see, like in that fight with Ayman Zahabi? Can he get there? But Lerone Murphy's no tough cookie. He's undefeated. He's never lost. He's never been finished. So that's going to be easier said than done. I could see this fight kind of playing out where it could kind of be like a 3-round war where both guys are going to, really put the pressure on. You're going to have those back and forth moments, but I do see Ramos getting his hand raised at the end of this thing. As I just think he'll, again, he's been a little bit more proven in the UFC. I feel a little bit more comfortable picking him as opposed to his opponent. So, and one more thing I'll mention, the height and reach in this one. Ramos is 5'9" with a 72-inch reach. Murphy is also 5'9" with a 73.5-inch reach. So if you're looking, thinking that, you got this bantamweight who's come up fighting at featherweight, he might be undersized. It's not the case in this fight. They're very similar as far as the height and reach goes. So I'm going to go Ramos in this one by decision.
I like it. And I'll be honest, I completely agree with you. The reason I kind of lean that way with you is the ability that Ramos has to seal rounds with takedowns. It's something very high fight IQ, very intelligent. If it's an iffy round, he sucks up those legs at the end of every single round. And he's always looking to put that stamp at the end to make sure he gets that last laugh. And Murphy has had bad takedown defense. He's had issues keeping the fight on the feet. Now, on the feet, he's incredible. He's got a real strong kicking game, good low kicks, good body kicks. He is able to reverse and sweep and get back to his feet, but there's also no lying that he gets taken down in the first place. And that's where I think if Ricardo can do exactly kind of what you were talking about, he'll be able to use his boxing, move around, control the range, and once the clock starts to kind of tick down towards the end of the round, he'll hit that takedown. And I think that's exactly how it's going to go. I think he's going to win this thing by decision. I don't see him being able to finish Murphy unless he gets on Murphy's back, because his submission game is slick. If he gets there, for sure. But I've got my eye on Murphy. I mean, he went out to Tiger Muay Thai earlier this year, which that's one of my absolute favorite gyms, especially when it comes to betting people. I love it when they head out to Tiger Muay Thai. They improve leaps and bounds. So I think he might be a prospect that we can bet on in his next fight or two, but I'm not quite ready to pull the trigger on him here. And I want to give a shout out once again, everybody in the chat. Just My 2 cents says specifically, what's up, Clinton James? So what's up, Just My 2 cents?
What's up, guys? How's it going? By the way, we have some breaking news, right? Did you hear about this on this card?
Yes. Go ahead.
You might as well mention it. Pedro Munhoz off this card against Frankie Edgar, tested positive for COVID-19. Ariel Helwani says it's canceled. I would imagine the options are limited because they got to fly someone to Fight Island unless they have someone in mind. I know Mo, I saw he tweeted us suggesting Sugar Sean. I think they'd rather grab someone on Fight Island and take them there. I know Ricky Simone's there cornering Paige Van Zandt. That might be a good option, but we'll see. I mean, Edgar's making his debut. You got to be careful about who you fight in your debut. Obviously, he's coming off a loss before that. So we'll see what they decide to do as far as a replacement for Frankie Edgar. But I have a feeling they're just going to reschedule that one. Just too big of a fight.
I agree. I think they'll probably reschedule it. Now, it does seem like they've done a pretty good job about having fighters on the back burner and ready to go in these types of situations, though. So it wouldn't shock me if they were able to go ahead and fill somebody in short notice. And honestly, it might not be such a bad idea to try to get Frankie Edgar a win. Like you said, it's a situation where it's a big fight. He's making his debut in the division. He's coming off of a loss. You could get him, if you could get him somebody on short notice that may be an easier matchup for him, kind of build that, rapport, bring back the aura of Frankie Edgar before he takes on someone like Munhoz. Maybe not a bad PR move by the UFC.
That's just it, though. But the question is, what are the options available? Like I said, I don't think they're going to fly someone over to Yas Island to fight Frankie Edgar. It's got to be the right opponent. And even someone like Ricky Simone, I think that's kind of a risky fight for Edgar. I know some people might say I'm crazy here, but there's really no upside for Edgar there. Simone's not ranked really high. He came off a couple losses before his last win. I just don't see the upside there. If anyone gets the upside, it's Ricky Simone. So we'll see what they decide to do, but I have a feeling they're just going to reschedule it just because Edgar's a special case, right? He's a big name, a former champion. They're not just going to give him some prospect without a name and risk him losing. He already did them a favor fighting Korean Zombie. I don't see them, giving him someone just for the sake of fighting, but it's up to him, I suppose. But I could see them being a little bit patient with Edgar's debut at 135.
He is that old school warrior type of fighter that if they give him a name, I'll bet you he takes it. But I completely agree with you that the UFC, I guess, maybe might want to handle it a little bit more delicately. Since the fight's off, I'll go ahead and let everybody know. I bet Frankie Edgar. I went ahead and locked that in this morning. I wanted to go ahead and take the shot on him. We're way out of order here on the card, but who cares? It's breaking news, folks, on the podcast. I was looking forward to it. I feel like he's coming off a couple losses, and his stock has really never been this low. But realistically, he's been fighting his entire career 2 weight classes up from where he should have. James, this was going to be the first fight in 7 UFC fights that Frankie Edgar would have a reach advantage. You know that?
Yeah, I believe it. I mean, he's always fought bigger opponents, right? And it's interesting you bet Edgar in that fight because I was going to go the other way. I think Munhoz is criminally underrated. Had a really tough fight against Aljamain Sterling, who we now know is legit as they come, just seeing the last win that he got over Corey Sandhagen. I think that was a tough outing and another fight that I didn't think had a lot of upside for Edgar in the sense that the only thing is Munhoz is ranked high, but in terms of name value, you could have given him a lot of other opponents that would have been easier than Pedro Munhoz. I think Munhoz is still a threat at 135. So if anything, I think Edgar kind of dodged a bullet here. Big Frankie fan, by the way, no disrespect, but I think I'm really high on Pedro Munhoz. I really like what he can do.
And I'm there with you on that one. I actually like Pedro Munhoz. I'm high on him myself, and that fight with Aljo was absolutely it was awesome. He did some good work in that fight, but I feel like this is one of those situations where I just kind of expected Frankie to have a little bit more respect. I feel like the line was a little bit too wide, and watching the fight with Korean Zombie, that was kind of a mercy stoppage from the referee. He didn't get flatlined. It wasn't like he was out staring at the lights. Like the referee stepped in and waved it off. He was still walking around on his feet. It wasn't like a really awful bad KO. And for me, that kind of spoke to the durability that Frankie still had there, and they kind of saved him a little bit. He could have gone out badly and gone out hard, but he didn't. I don't know. I just felt like it was one of those things where he's not going to be a champion again. I think those days are gone, unfortunately. But at the right weight class, finally being the same size as his opponent, having the reach advantage for the first time in so long, it's kind of a spot we hit with and I'm blanking on it now that I'm trying to bring it up. It was a female fight not too long ago. Tecia Torres.
Right.
Exact same spot with Tecia Torres.
Exactly. Yeah. No, very good point. Absolutely.
It's an angle that I'm looking for right now, honestly, because it's gone like 4-1 in the last 5 fights. And I know that's not a huge sample size, but so far it's working. So I'm trying to ride it. The fact that I was getting plus 185 on the veteran who has been facing nothing but the cream of the crop and taking a perceived step down against a guy like Pedro Munhoz, which again, I know he's incredible. We're not trying to diminish him here, but a reasonable opponent for Frankie, I feel like. It's a spot I had to take. If it lost, it lost, but I was going to go ahead and take it.
And just quickly, it seems like Ricky Simone has already volunteered his services. Don't blame him. Opportunity of a lifetime. He fought a legend before and Faber didn't go his way. Now he could potentially fight another legend in Frankie Edgar. So we'll see if Edgar accepts. But yeah, we'll see. I think they'll probably reschedule it, but I've been wrong before. Just like I didn't think Masvidal was going to fight Usman, and that ended up happening. So there you go.
Can you believe that actually got put together? I was all said and done, put a package on it, ship it out a couple of weeks. We're not getting this fight, especially with all the talk of, the finances and crap like that. Like, how did that actually get pulled together? I'm floored.
Yeah, it's money talks, right? It's like, what's that old New Jack City, that old movie, Money Talks and BS Walks, there you go. Don't want to swear in here. I'm Canadian, got a reputation to uphold. Yeah, so there you go. There you go. That's my thoughts on that.
All right, good stuff. So finally, we've been sitting on this screen forever, but it's all good. I love the little tangents. That's what makes live shows fun. We've got Molly Meatball McCann taking on Talia Santos, and we spoke about Molly McCann just a little bit earlier in the evening. I love Molly Meatball. First off, the nickname is awesome, but she just seems like a fun person. Her, JJ, and Jojua, which I'm not making jokes there. Those are actually the names of the girls. They just seem like they're so fun and bubbly, and they're almost, again, I'm not trying to be degrading or anything to anybody. They're adorable. They're cute outside the cage. And then they're these violent, horrific fighters that would destroy me even though I've got 100 pounds on them. I just love how they flip that switch. And Molly's that same kind of person. She seems really fun loving, and then she gets in there and she's an animal, man. She's got a big right hand, nice timing, good counters. She's got good head movement, and it seems like she throws these she's got really creative striking these days, spinning back fists, step-in elbows. I mean, it seems like she's headed the right direction to me. She has that constant threat of changing levels as well. She doesn't do a great job of holding her opponents down, but she does get them down, and if she can establish a dominant position, her ground and pound is insane. The only thing I seem to see her struggling with really is the reach advantage. When she fought Lipsky, she had a bit of a hard time with the reach thing, and that's where this is going to be a bit of a question mark for me. I want to back Meatball here. I really want to bet on Molly, but Santos has a 6-inch reach advantage, and that is not a small reach advantage. That is a big reach advantage.
Yeah, we'll definitely have to see how this plays out. I think if you look at the level of competition, with McCann, she's fought some really tough opposition. Even prior to this in Cage Warriors, she was fighting the top-notch fighters, and it looked like that didn't really translate in her debut. She lost to Jillian Robertson, fairly easily in the second round. But she's bounced back since then. I spoke to her. I was in Boston for that fight, her last fight against Belbita, and she just says she's just taking a different approach. Not putting as much pressure on herself. Really, trying to go back to the basics, and we saw that in the last fight, and obviously a good win, but. A fight where, she definitely, just looked more experienced than her opponent, looked a lot more sort of a step ahead there. But you're right, the reach, that's why she's a favorite here, because she's fighting someone who's only got, two UFC fights, right? One UFC fight. She had the win on Contender Series. That's where I was getting mixed up, and that is Talia Santos.
She's 1-1.
Yeah, this is another one I have a really tough read on. I'd almost say that kind of like we talked about before, I think the value here is actually on McCann, just because, again, she's been a little bit more experienced as far as what she's done in terms of her body of work, but that reach advantage, you're right. I mean, here's the thing. There's certain fighters that use the reach advantage well, and they're able to capitalize on it, and it frustrates their opponents. Like Dan Hooker's a good example, right? Like when he fought Iaquinta, he really was able to just utilize that and really frustrate Iaquinta here. But some fighters don't. Look at Kendall Grove. There's a good example. Very lanky middleweight, never could use his reach very well. Guys would find their way on the inside and knock him out or whatever, right? So that's sort of the question in this fight. Can Santos use her height and reach in this instance? I think she probably can, but I do think if Molly McCann gets the plus money, I might throw a little sprinkle on there just because she's a game opponent. You know, again, someone that you don't want to count out, has a lot of heart. I just don't see, it being an easy fight for Santos if she does win. So may throw a little sprinkle on there, but like you said, I got to go with the height and reach into this one, and I got to go with Santos.
Okay. I'm kind of agreeing with everything you said, except for at the very end. I'm looking for any reason I can to back Molly Meatball here. And Coco Berry, I left this comment up on the screen as long as I have because this is exactly the point for me. She lost to Mara Romero, and that's a bad look. I mean, you make your UFC debut, and that's about as softball as it gets right now. She is 1-4 in her last 5, I want to say, and her only win came by split decision, which I actually think was close and hairy and probably should have gone the other way. So if you're losing to that, there's a very good chance you're just not going to be UFC caliber. Now, granted, she is young. There's a chance that she can improve. But, I mean, the record that got her, here's another one. I'm going to go ahead and put this one up. Santos' record is really bad. Like, I know she's 15-1, but it's extremely padded. And she's got a win over a girl who is no joke, James, 0-10. She's still
no, I'm looking at it here. 0-1, 0-0. Yeah, it's not looking good.
Yeah, it does not speak to somebody who got here legitimately, in my opinion. And I think that Molly's going to be able to make it a brawl. I mean, what I noticed about Santos, she jab leg kicks just on repeat. Jab leg kick, jab leg kick. If you can't close that distance, she'll eat your leg up. But I think Molly's the type of fighter that'll kind of crash the pocket, pin her up against the fence, make it ugly, make it dirty. And Santos doesn't seem to have much of a ground game. So I know I said Molly kind of struggles to hold her opponents down, but I actually think this is an opponent who she might be able to hold down. I feel like she can get a little bit of ground and pound in, and especially looking at the line, Santos, I think exactly because of that reach advantage, is a slight favorite here at -115. And I'm hoping a little bit more money comes in on her. If I can get even money, +110, something like that on Meatball, I'm probably going to take the shot. If it heads the other way and they get to, even money -110 across the board, I still might take the shot. I just don't want to pay like -130 or anything for Meatball.
No, fair enough. No, absolutely. And you bring up a great point about the level of competition. I didn't even actually see that. I just remember her from Contender Series and she had that good win, but level of competition is no joke. I mean, we've seen this, I don't know how many times. It's like you mentioned the Torres fight. There's a good example where Torres was losing, but against like the top-notch fighters. That stuff does play a role into things, right? You got to look at that. And so, for me, it's something you can't ignore there. And yeah, McCann gets the plus money absolutely better. I think it's worth it.
Absolutely. And that's, like I said, man, that's that angle. That's the angle we talked about a little bit earlier that I've been looking extremely hard to get to. And everybody here in the chat, all 132 of you, are getting that knowledge and info for free. So do me a favor and smash the like button. Subscribe to Odds HQ. And we have one last fight here on the preliminary card. However, James, unless I'm mistaken, this one's been canceled due to COVID.
You talking the Carla Esparza fight?
It looks like
or no, sorry, I'm not looking at your screen. Oh yeah, sorry. No, that fight is on. There's a new opponent. It's Andreas. I don't know how to pronounce his last name. The Greek fighter. He's fighting now. Yeah, if you look on Tapology, it's Andreas Michelandius. I'll be completely honest. I don't know a ton about him. He's actually making his debut. He fought in Titan FC. That's where I remember him from. He fought in Titan FC last year. He knocked out Marcel Fortuna in the first round. So he's a guy that they've been kind of keeping an eye on. Greek fighter, like I said, trains out of Greece. I actually don't know where he trains now, but according to this, he's trained a lot in Greece. So he's coming into this one with a 12-3 record and taking on the former, I believe he was Cage Warriors champ, right? And I was pronounced the last guy's name wrong, but you know who I'm talking about, the former Cage Warriors middleweight champion, or light heavyweight champion, I should say.
I got you. All right. Well, hey, glad to have you on the show for sure, and more so than ever before already, because, yeah, man, that's info that we did not have. I'm going to have to do some digging then, because I was not prepared to break this fight down. As soon as I saw that Moreira was out due to COVID, kind of like we talked about with Frankie. I was like, there's no way they're going to get this Bakatakas guy a late replacement here on Fight Island. So I just kind of drew a line through it and moved on. I'm happy to hear that we're going to kind of fill out the rest of this card, though, because losing 2-3 fights in a row on it, this would be a very short middle of the week card. So
yes,
good, we got to step up there, but I can't offer any advice on it. Obviously, we don't have a betting line, and I don't know anything about the opponent. So in that case, I guess we will just go ahead and move on over to the main card. I do want to take a real quick break here, though, for some breaking news. Believe it or not, we've got Diehard merch, folks. I'm rocking the shirt, and we've made the move. We're bringing the merchandise out. Head on over to pubsportsradio.com. They're actually hosting this here for me. And you ready for this, guys? This one's more for the chat, James. I know you're not overly familiar, but I am so excited about this one. We've got a Fireball and Popcorn shirt, folks.
Awesome.
We've got a legit Fireball and Popcorn shirt. So everybody in the chat, make sure you head on over there and snag one of these. They are hot off the presses right now, and I've already bought a couple of them myself. I can't wait to rock this shirt. I'm super excited about it.
Yes.
That's one of those things that just kind of, I don't know why I started saying it, but I did, and it's naturally turned into like a recurring event here on the podcast. So got to roll with it.
Yes, no, got love the merch, man. That's smart. Got to build the brand. I'm a big fan of that. I got to get some shirts one of these days. I just haven't had time, but maybe now's the time to do it.
Now's the time. You're full, freelancing. You're doing your own
free
thing.
There's the
master of your own destiny.
Free. I'm not exclusive, so it's all good. So I can do lots of things now, which will be great. So
I love it. Have you seen? Obviously, this is going to be a dumb question. You know Luke Thomas, right? I love.
Yeah, of course I know Luke Thomas. Yeah.
I love his logo. The outline of his head with the beard.
It looks like him. It definitely looks like him. He's done a good job at that. He's a guy that's done the YouTube thing very well. He's very good about putting videos out, and his views do amazing. And he's just someone who gets it. A lot of people don't treat this as a business as much, and Thomas has done that very well. So I admire him for that. I mean, there's some stuff. There's a lot of things actually I don't agree with Luke on, but in general, he's very good from a business perspective. He knows a lot of what he's doing.
Hey, we've all got hot takes from time to time, but yeah, Luke's got some of the hottest takes out there, and I'm with you on that. But I mean, genius work from a marketing perspective. That logo is instantaneously recognizable. It's just his head, which is awesome to me. Yeah. First fight on the main card, one that I'm personally very excited about. We've got Jared Flash Gordon taking on Chris Fishgold, and this is one that I know my boy in the chat, Boston Nick. He's a huge fan of Jared Gordon. I think he's on a personal level. He's talked to him multiple times and stuff like that. Really cool guy. I love his story. Unless I'm mistaken, I think he struggled with some substance abuse, things like that, and has battled his way back all the way to being a top tier UFC athlete. I love comeback stories like that, and I just love that people are able to kind of take hold of their own destinies and do stuff like that after, a lot of people probably would have written them off,
No, I agree. His story is great. And it's not just his story. It's the fact that he continues to help people with addiction. He's a guy that if anyone DMs him, he'll reply to them and he'll help them out. And he's such a positive guy. We need more people like him in our sport that are good role models and, giving back. He's said so himself, fighting secondary, being someone to help with addiction. That's the first thing. That's his greater purpose. And I respect that, man. He's a great guy and doesn't get enough respect in this industry.
Absolutely. I am right there with you. And unfortunately, this is where this show gets a little tough sometimes. This is a betting show. We're doing our best to make some money here. Jared Gordon's got no chin, and that's a huge problem. I know he's kind of taken a bit of a step down, like we talked about. He's one of those fighters who is 1-3 in his last 4, and he's fought guys like Carlos Diego Ferreira, who's an absolute monster, Charles Oliveira, who is on his way to the top 3 at 155, which is one of the hardest things in the world to do. His win is an okay win, grindy over Dan Moret, who I'm not sold on. So he's one of these fighters that's somewhere strangely in the middle. I'm not sure quite where to put him. He could be, just barely above that bottom tier in the UFC, or he could be solidly in the center and have some future on him. But honestly, I got to be worried that, for lack of a better way to put it, I think Charles Oliveira may have taken his soul. Like, those are the types of knockouts that are hard to come back from. I say that Frankie Edgar took BJ Penn's soul. Like that was the straw that broke the camel's back. It's kind of all downhill from there. He's got good hands. He's got a high work rate, but that really opens him up to being hit and countered. He's got to rely on his wrestling, and he's moving back down to featherweight, which for the most part, I hate when guys try to reset the clock by dropping a weight class. We see a whole lot more success when people move up a weight class from cutting too much weight. And if you're already having chin issues, cutting an extra 10 pounds just doesn't seem like the answer to me. What do you think?
So I agree with you. There's a lot of things that are going into this fight that we got to point out. First off, Jared Gordon at a new camp now. He's at Sanford MMA, which also used to be called Hard Knocks, which used to be called Black Zillions before that. His fiance lives in Florida. So instead of traveling back and forth, he's just made Florida his home. He's left Rufus Sport. I think this is a good fit for him. He's getting to train with a lot of really high-level guys, a lot of good high-level training. He did at Rufus Sport, but he's just getting different looks, which I think is kind of needed in his career because he struggled with consistency, like you mentioned. This is another case where I think he's fighting really tough guys, like losing to Diego Ferreira, losing to Charles Oliveira, who Oliveira, in my opinion, is a top 5 fighter. He might not be there in the rankings, but he's a top 5 lightweight. Trust me, what he did to Kevin Lee, he should be in the top 5 as far as I'm concerned. So we don't really know where he fits. This is going to be a good test for him because I think Fishgold's kind of the same way. He loses to Calvin Kattar, but then, after that, he's, had some success as well as far as, actually lost to Amirkhani in his last fight, but beat Daniel Tamer. The good news for Jared Gordon, though, you talked about his chin. You have to go all the way back to February of 2016, the last time Chris Fishgold had a knockout win. So I think that helps Jared Gordon in this case. But like you mentioned, dropping down to featherweight, first time since 2017. And actually in that fight in 2017 against Mitchell Quinones, that was a catchweight because Gordon actually missed weight. But here's the thing. He's known about this fight for a while, or at least he knew that he was going to fight at featherweight for quite some time. If you remember, he initially was supposed to fight Matt Sales in May. I don't know why I said Jane. That really doesn't make any sense. I have no idea. But that event was obviously canceled due to the coronavirus. So he's been ready to get down, quite well. And his fiance, I mean, she's I want to say American Ninja Warrior, some sort of high-level competitor. So, he's living with someone that's getting his diet right, making sure he's getting down there. He wanted to go down to featherweight when he was at Rufus Sport, but Duke Rufus said, no, it's too much of a cut for you. So now he's trying it his way, and he's trying to do it this way. So I think the fact that he's had notice will mean a better cut for him. If you remember when he fought Quinones, that was his UFC debut. I believe it was on short notice. So it was tough for him to cut the weight then. So we got to point that out as well, that, there's some circumstances as far as him missing weight in when he made his UFC debut at featherweight, or at least attempted to. So there's all the things there. As far as Fishgold goes, he's kind of in the same boat. Like I mentioned, losing to Amirkhani, losing to Calvin Kattar. I mean, those aren't bad losses. Those are two really good featherweights in that division here, but he's more of a battle-tested featherweight. And he's another guy that fought good competition on the regional scene in Cage Warriors, who's the former Cage Warriors lightweight champion as well. So you've got a mix of sort of guys sort of coming in here as far as it's a good fight to see who really is good. I mean, it's really a good test to see, is it that you're fighting tough competition, or is it that maybe you're not as good? Looking at the line right now, like you said, I believe looking at it here, Gordon is a slight favorite. That's kind of how I would see this fight too. I think if you're looking at the two who has more upside, I think it is Jared Gordon, despite him getting finished in some of those fights. But I think he knows that, he just got a new contract. There's a lot riding on him in this fight. I think Gordon's going to rise to the occasion. I like him being at Sanford MMA. I think that's a better fit for him. I think we're going to see Jared Gordon put on one of the best performances of his career and go out there and take out a guy in Chris Fishgold, because I don't see Fishgold going out there and submitting Jared Gordon. Again, you got to look all the way back. I mean, Gordon's actually never been submitted in his pro career, so keep that in mind too. It's only been knockouts, so I like that as well. Give me Gordon in a hard-fought decision, but I think he gets it done.
Okay. I'm really loving this because a lot of times whenever I have people come on the show, we tend to agree a lot on picks. And for the viewers, that can be a little bit boring. I'm on the opposite side of the fence on this one. Again, I'm kind of looking at the dog here. So I see everything that you're saying. I totally understand. I feel like this may be a little bit too late for Gordon. And I agree. I like the camp change. I like the nutrition change and all that good stuff. But cutting that extra 10 pounds, geez, I'm having trouble talking now too. Cutting that down still concerns me. And then honestly, Chris Fishgold, he throws bombs. He hasn't actually gotten those knockout wins, but he didn't look bad against Calvin Kattar before he got knocked out. And that's a loss that I can personally just kind of draw a line through. Calvin Kattar is a guy that I think is headed for the title. And I don't really knock him for having that loss. But same thing with Charles Oliveira on the flip side. So, I don't want to be hypocritical here by looking at one and not the other. But the win, he handled Daniel Tamer the way you're supposed to, and that's where I would have expected Jared Gordon to handle somebody like Dan Moret, but he kind of had to grind out a decision win, and he looked a little bit tired. He looked kind of gassed out there in the third round, which, again, cutting weight, I got to wonder if that'll be detrimental to his gas tank as well. And then even though Chris Fishgold got the loss against Makwan Amerikani, Makwan's another guy who, as much as I'm not a fan of his personally speaking, he's an incredible fighter. He's an absolute monster on the mat, man. And Chris Fishgold had a great first round, I believe. I'm running off memory here on this one, but I want to say that Chris Fishgold actually looked pretty good in that fight until it hit the mat. And then he was just outclassed, and Makwan went, oh, I've got an edge, and kind of exposed that edge. That's where, man, if Jared Gordon can't just blanket Fishgold for a full 15 minutes, I feel like he might get caught here. And I know we're not expecting that submission necessarily to materialize, but submitting a gassed fighter is a whole lot easier to do. And if he does end up having those gas tank issues late, then I think that opens that back door for Chris Fishgold. So I'm kind of hoping people see it your way. And if money keeps on coming in on Jared Gordon, I'm going to take the shot on Chris Fishgold a little closer to fight time. Again, I'm going to try. I'm really bad with line movement, James. I can't predict what the general public are going to think or do. I tend to think that everyone thinks kind of the same way I do. So I lock these underdog bets in way too early, and I miss out on those juicy lines after the favorites have been hammered. So this time I'm going to try and, have a little bit of self-control and wait on this one. If I can get in the ballpark of like plus 130 or something on Chris Fishgold, I'm going to take it.
Absolutely. Totally. And this is why we're on here. We got to disagree every once in a while. Fishgold could go out there and win. It could be too much of a cut for Jared Gordon. We'll see what happens, but I don't know. Something tells me Flash is going to have a good performance in this one, but we'll see when the fight actually takes place.
For sure. And you know what, man, that's that gambler spider sense, that little itch on the back of your neck that tells you something's going to happen. I trust that feeling. I've learned, how I got sports betting started was I used to play a lot of poker. And that feeling of, oh, crap, like something's going to happen here, whether it be good or bad, like learning to tune into that feeling it pays benefits. So I will remember this moment when you when the fights come around, because if Jared Gordon looks good and gets it done, I'll be tipping my cap to you on this one.
Absolutely.
We have got Abdul Razak Alhassan finally making his return, a guy that everybody has been hyped on and wanting to see more of. However, in another very confusing matchmaking spot, he's taking on 9-1 Lazzez, I believe.
Yeah, I think that's how you say it. He's from Tunisia. It's kind of a tough one to say as far as that goes. I think you're right on that. Could be wrong, but
all right.
We'll just run with it. Yeah, exactly.
Razak Alhassan, I mean, he's one of these guys that I don't use this term lightly, James. Death touch. He has got the death touch. When this guy touches you, you feel it. Now, he's a little small for 170, but he's got those big old running back thighs. Like, this guy's legs, his lower body is huge, and he's explosive, he's fast, but he kind of seems to be also the guy that got sold on his own knockout power. He leaves himself open for shots. He's very counterable. Just no one's been able to make him pay for it yet. Now, this kid Lazzez, I feel like we're just in for a banger. This is the definition of a fireball and popcorn fight for me, because I'm just going to sit back and watch this thing. As much as I think Abdul is going to go ahead and come out and do what he does and get the knockout, I don't want to lay 3-1 on him when I haven't been able to get a whole lot of a feel for his opponent. And everything I've seen from his opponent, even though he's fighting, regional caliber fighters, they're not really bad opponents. And he's a hell of a striker himself. You got to help me out on this one, man. What are you seeing here?
Yeah, this is a really tough one for me because I'm like you. I've been very high on Razak Alhassan. He also trains at Fortis MMA, which is a gym just full of killers. I mean, one of his main training partners is Jeff Neal. I mean, think how much better he is getting. Both of them are getting just by training together. So that's good. Unreal. The thing that concerns me in this fight, though, is the layoff. We talked about it a bit there. Razak Alhassan had some legal issues outside the cage. Don't need to get into those. Don't want to cause any controversy here. But he hasn't actually fought since August or September of 2018. That's a long layoff heading into a fight like this, and especially one that's going to be overseas as well. So he's going to have some traveling on top of that. I know he's been training hard. I know, again, he comes from a really good camp here, but he's taking on a guy in Lazzez who I can't find his height, but I do notice he is taller than Razak Alhassan. Tapology has him at 6'2". Sherdog has him at 6'1". So that could play a role. You did mention how Razak Alhassan is a little bit undersized. And here's the problem here. This is the problem that it comes down to. Like, when it comes to watching guys fight and finishing their opponents, it's easy to sort of, I use the word romanticize. Johnny Walker's a good example of this. And I'll kind of explain what I mean here. In that, when Walker was knocking out guys like Misha Serkinov and Justin Ledet and guys like that, everyone was like, this is a guy that gave John Jones a test. And then what happened? He fought Corey Anderson, and, now he's lost 2 in a row. He lost to Krylov in his last fight as well. So we kind of knew that, okay, level of competition does play a role in this one. I'm looking at Alhassan. I mean, 2 of his wins are against Sabah Hamasi, who's now in Bellator, who's kind of just, he's sort of a middle tier guy. Nico Price was a good win. I'll give him that. But Price is kind of a wild guy anyways, that if he doesn't kill you, he'll probably be susceptible to being killed himself. And then you look before that, he's got the win over Charlie Ward, who had 4 fights at the time, or Mariak Madoff, who's now middleweight. It's really tough to gauge where he is. Like, is he that good, or is it a case that he's just fighting easier guys? And you can say the same for Lazzez here too, because he's making his debut. He's fought, the records here are looking pretty good. 5-2. Guy he fought to get in the UFC was 10-9-1. Fought another guy who was undefeated as well. He's fought in Brave and a few of the international promotions. I don't know a ton about this Lazzez guy because I haven't seen a lot of tape on him. All I'm going to say is
out there.
No, exactly. And so I think from this perspective, to me, the odds are crazy. Like -310 for a guy that's had a long layoff like he has. Who knows how he's going to look in this fight? I would not bet -310. I think there could be some value in his opponent, just in the sense that he's a guy that's sort of being counted out here and, might have a height and reach advantage in this one. So that's kind of interesting. I'm going to pick Razak Alhassan just because I've seen him more and I've seen what he's able to do. But I mean, plus 255 for a guy who's making his debut really has nothing to lose in this fight. I think that's a dangerous thing there. So you may want to look at maybe betting that. But Razak Alhassan, again, we know he's got dynamite in his hands. He's really got to go out there and prove himself. And I think part of it too is that they want to give him a fight and get him that highlight reel finish as well to remind people that he's back in the division. Who's his manager, Ali Abdulaziz? That he always gets some favorable matchups in a lot of cases. So that's something to consider as well.
Often.
Yeah. So yeah, I'll pick Razak Alhassan, but -310 is way too much. If anything, I'd look at the inside the distance prop. Just looking at it here, I think inside the distance is -190. That's a little bit better for my liking. I think more than likely he finishes this fight. So maybe look at that instead, or the knockout prop if that comes out soon enough.
I like it. I couldn't have said it better myself. I'm in the exact same boat. I'm not laying this kind of a price, and I would caution people from parlaying him just because we know so little about his opponent. And like you said, that layoff, everyone's expecting him to look exactly like he did the last time out. And I'm a huge believer in Nico Price. I love betting on that guy at those big, long shot underdog odds because he can flip that switch off with one punch. But that's the kind of opponent that's going to make Razak look good because he can put you down. And if you've got that lack of defense, he's going to hit you, and he's going to hit you hard. I can't get a read on how good or bad Lazzez's defense is. So because of that, I'm going to go ahead and steer clear. I do hope this one ends in an absolute banger of a knockout, but I've got to give a quick shout out to my guy Brian here because apparently he's got those running back thighs as well. Some good genes on my boy there. And James, I'm sure you probably missed it, but last week Brian almost got me in trouble with the wife. He was petitioning for me to get a date with Jillian Robertson, who I'm a massive fan of, and my wife was listening to the stream when he went ahead and pitched that. So I got to sleep on the couch last week thanks to the live stream.
There you go. Yeah, got to be careful about that.
So the next fight, we've got another cancellation, I believe. Last time I said this, you corrected me, so I'm going to go to you, James. Is this fight on or off?
It's off. It's off, according to right now. Yeah. So
okay.
we don't have a co-main event, so we're right at the main event now. Believe it or not.
Believe it or not, it's a wild world we live in. And I was doing some Instagram stalking online. Esparza looked good leading into this one. I was very curious because Marina Rodriguez is no joke, and Esparza, she looked like she was in the best shape I've ever seen. So I was very intrigued by this fight. It's a bummer we're not going to see it. But, yep, drawing a line through it. Same thing. We talked a little bit briefly. If you're new to the show, if you're just tuning in, thank you all so much for being here. We're just shy of 200 live viewers at the moment, so thank you all. Pedro Munhoz is popped for COVID, folks. This fight is off. Your boy had a bet on Frankie Edgar. I was hoping for him to bounce back. James and I were going head-to-head. He likes Pedro Munhoz here, and now we're just never going to know. We'll see what happens. James, I think you said that we have a volunteer potentially to fill in, though?
Well, Ricky Simone says he's willing to fight Frankie Edgar, but now I'm seeing here on Twitter, Frankie Edgar looking to get that fight rescheduled. So that's kind of what I figured. He's making his bantamweight debut. He's coming off a loss. He's not just going to take a short notice fight, especially when he did so in his last fight. I think you'll see Edgar and that Munhoz fight rebooked when Munhoz is hopefully healthy. And want to also, didn't even say this, send my best to Pedro Munhoz and his family. Hopefully they're not impacted by this too badly and they can get better.
Definitely. It's scary, people coming down with COVID these days. So hoping for a speedy recovery there for sure. I heard Gilbert Burns is doing well, so I'm glad to hear that he's doing all right after popping for COVID as well. Main event time, folks. We've got Calvin Kattar taking on Dan Ige, and this one is an absolute banger of a fight. Calvin Kattar, we all know about this kid's boxing. I mean, he is 21-4. Ige is 14-2, so more experience on Kattar's side. And like I said, the boxing, but he's facing an opponent who's got solid hands as well. So this is going to be a very, very interesting spot where both guys, I think, are going to look to stick and move. And then when they do trade, it'll be some heated exchanges in the pocket. Kattar's got really good head movement. He mixes in the low kicks a lot more lately, but he struggles with those, actually. He took a lot of low kicks in his last couple of fights and had kind of a hard time with them. I think that's something Dan Ige can potentially use in this fight. He's got a slick right hand, Ige that is. Good offensive wrestling, great timing when he's in the pocket, and he's got strong top control. This is a really, really good fight. Another one of these main events that I feel like, Poirier and Hooker, how does this fight not deliver as a main event? How are you feeling on this one?
I like Calvin Kattar in this fight. I think the line is exactly where it needs to be. I'm seeing some lines right now have close to like minus 265. I think that's where it should be. I do see on paper Calvin Kattar being the better fighter, and the fact that this is a main event, something that Kattar's been in before, although it should have been 5 rounds. It was 3 rounds against Zabit, but nonetheless, I just think there's a lot of reasons like Calvin Kattar in this fight. First off, you mentioned the boxing. I think there's moments with Calvin Kattar where you see that potential contender, that potential title challenger, like the win over Jeremy Stevens, where he was able to, took a bit of damage in that first round, came back, ended up getting the finish in that one. Ricardo Lamas. Yes, exactly. Ricardo Lamas. I know Lamas is a vet, but to go out there and finish him in the first round, I was at that fight last year. It was about this time last year, or maybe a week before. Ends up getting it there, finishing Chris Fishgold. He's not just going out there; he's finishing guys. He's finishing Shane Burgos. Look at what Shane Burgos went through against Josh Emmett in a fight, showing his granite chin. Kattar was actually able to finish him in that fight. I mean, this is a guy that outside of the loss to Moicano, which I'm sure if they rematch, that would be a different story. And losing to Zabit, I mean, if that's 2 more rounds, that could be a different fight as well too. And Zabit's considered the best prospect at 145 as well. So in terms of being battle tested, Calvin Kattar is definitely that on paper. Danny Ige, what I like to compare him to, Danny Ige is like the equivalent of like a blue collar worker. Like he's a guy that, clocks in early and leaves late and all that. And he does I don't think Danny Ige was gifted anything like in terms of actual talent, like he doesn't do anything extraordinary, but he works very hard. You see his Instagram stories. He's training all the time. His wife is also like a CrossFit instructor or trainer or something like that. So they're always training. Like he is everything he has got in the UFC, all these opportunities, him getting this main event spot is all out of hard work. And it's just the fact that he's capitalized on opportunities. Did he beat Edson Barbosa in his last fight? I don't think he did, but still the fact that he even took it that far with a guy like Edson Barbosa as much of a killer as he is, speaks volumes about what Ige's been able to do. Beat Mirsad Bektik before that. I mean, here's a guy that, literally does everything you could possibly do right to get in this position. But at a certain point, he's going to fight someone that has talent and has that little X factor that you see in certain fights where it's going to be the difference in the fight. And that's this fight right here. It's Calvin Kattar. Calvin Kattar, I think this is going to be a war. This is going to be potentially a fight of the year here, but I see Kattar edging it out. The question is, does Calvin Kattar finish this fight? Ige's never been finished in his career. His debut loss to Julio Arce was a decision. He lost the decision on the regional scene in his 3rd pro fight. I think Kattar could potentially do it here, maybe like a 4th round finish. Kattar's cardio will kick in. I think he'll be able to, really utilize what he's been able to do and just put on the type of performance that people are going to say, I think this guy potentially could leapfrog some other guys and potentially get a title shot. That's what I think is going to happen here. Give me Calvin Kattar by late stoppage. I think he gets it done.
Hey, I am right there with you. We agree just absolutely spot on in this fight, man. I am all in on Kattar. I am sold on this kid. His cardio is unreal, and I'm in that group that thought if he had just one more round against Zabit, I think he was going to put him away. He was coming on strong in that 3rd round, and Zabit just didn't seem to have an answer for him. And the way that he was able to flip that switch against Jeremy Stevens and then land that elbow in the 2nd round, I mean, that is hard to do. I know Aldo was able to put Stevens down with a body shot, but, a big rib roaster, a liver shot, something like that, nobody can take those. to take somebody out with a headshot like that elbow and just cave him in, that was incredibly impressive to me. And then the other thing to consider for me here is that I don't think Ige is going to have time to recover. Both these guys fought in May. And this is going to be a real quick turnaround for both fighters. And that Barboza fight was an absolute war for Ige. He got knocked down and almost put away in the first round. And then he almost got dropped. He kind of keeled over from a big shot in the second round. That was far more of a battle than what Kattar took against Jeremy Stephens. And I know Stephens, we can debate who puts out more, Stephens versus Barboza, but I just think Ige kind of took the worst beating of the two. And with this quick turnaround, I think that's going to favor Kattar, especially because I feel like Kattar is streaking. Ige has 2 split decisions in his last couple of fights. He went to split with Mursad, he went to split with Barboza, whereas Kattar is taking every step up and completely crushing his opponents. And that level of competition is getting higher. So I'm right there with you. I think Ige is going to be a good, maybe top 10 guy hanging around that area, but Kattar is the true title contender here for me. And what I went ahead and did, I don't know if you've got time, but James, since we lost a couple of fights here, maybe we can talk ever so briefly about the Usman versus Masvidal fight, because I'm going to go ahead and parlay the two. I'm going big. I'm risking 2.5 units to win 2 units, parlaying Usman and Kattar, because I just see them both absolutely dominating here. I think the lines are about where they're supposed to be. They might even be a little bit wider. I think Kattar gets the KO, maybe late. And I think that Usman is just going to be able to absolutely dominate Masvidal in the grappling area. People forget that Masvidal has always struggled with wrestlers. And it seems like as of late, he's kind of had hand-picked opponents that are willing to stand and bang with him, that aren't going to take him down, that aren't going to expose that. And I know he's been working on his wrestling, but to get to the level of somebody like Usman, you've got to be a lifelong wrestler, or it's something you've got to be taking very, very seriously for maybe, I don't know, a year and a half, 2 years, something like that, to get to where you can compete with a guy like that. And let's be real, Usman's not going to put his head down. We're not going to see a repeat of the Askren KO of the year. Usman is going to set his takedowns up, and he's gotten so damn good at striking that I think he's going to be able to hold his own on the feet against a guy like Masvidal for as long as he needs to. I'm not saying he needs to hang out in that range, because that's where we get the door open for a knockout loss, but Usman's too smart for that. I don't think he's going to get caught in that. So I'm going hard, parlaying the main events one after the other, Usman and Kattar. How do you feel, or how do you see Usman and Masvidal playing out?
I'm glad we agree here. I hate to bore the audience here that we're kind of agreeing on these last couple things, but I completely agree. Like, there are people, I scroll my timeline on Facebook, Twitter, whatever. There's people saying that Masvidal is going to knock out Usman in the first round. What planet do you live on? Like, Usman has never been finished in the UFC. Masvidal's not like a one-punch KO guy. And look who Usman's been training with over the last little bit. It's Justin Gaethje. If he knows anyone that's going to knock his head off, it's that guy. So I'm a big Masvidal fan. I think it's absolutely tremendous what he was able to do last year, but you got to look at the opponents he fought. Till's not a wrestler. Askren is a wrestler, but didn't even have a chance. Like, the Askren fight was like literally the worst thing he could do against the best thing Masvidal could do, which was Masvidal set up that knee. Askren was going to go for the takedown, and he got knocked out. It reminds me of when Fabricio Verdum fought Junior Dos Santos the very first time. Verdum was putting his head down to throw a punch, and Dos Santos did an uppercut and knocked him out. It was the same sort of thing. It was like a perfect storm. And then he fights Nate Diaz, who will never wrestle in his entire life. So that was a given too. So that's something to point out as well. So you got to look at the level of competition. You got to look at who he's fighting as far as guys that aren't wrestlers. Like, go look at the Maia fight. Maia was taking him down. Wonder Boy. There's all these fights where, like you referenced there, where Masvidal, has some issues with the wrestling. And Masvidal has been working with Bo Nickel, which is great. Bo Nickel, Penn State wrestler. That's, they're sort of doing this program now at ATT where they're bringing in a lot of these high-level wrestlers to work with the MMA fighters. A lot of these wrestlers transitioning to MMA. I think that's good news. But you're right. It's not enough time to train for a guy like Usman. The only thing I worry about in this fight is there is something like Masvidal has nothing to lose here. The person who has everything to lose in this fight is Kamaru Usman. Right? Like, he's already not a popular champion. He's in terms of he beat Colby, had all this momentum. We haven't heard a peep from him basically since then. And Masvidal, if he loses this fight, big deal. He's got double-digit losses. People are still going to pay to watch him fight. He is the A side of this main event. People like this main event more than him, Gilbert Burns, because of the name value. You got a guy in Masvidal who everyone loves, but you can't look past the style matchup here. So I think it's a pretty safe bet picking Usman and picking Kattar. I would agree with that. The only thing that worries me is that there is something dangerous about a guy like Masvidal who really has nothing to lose here. It's not like, I don't think the title really means much to him. I think it's about getting paid and keeping the fans entertained, and he'll always have that, no matter what. But with Usman, like he's got to win this fight. Otherwise, he's going to go into basically where Tyron Woodley went, which is just where, fans are just like, they can't wait to see him lose after this. So yeah, I think it's a pretty safe bet, but I do worry a bit about Masvidal just having nothing to lose. That is a pretty dangerous thing to put in someone in a main event. That's all I'm saying.
I completely get it. I'm right there with you, but when you've got someone like Masvidal who's coming in on shorter notice, again, we don't know if he took his foot off the gas pedal training for this fight when the whole thing fell through and the negotiation stopped. We kind of it's something kind of like when Tony Ferguson had the match with Justin Gaethje come back around again. He made that weight cut not thinking he was going to fight again 2 weeks later. I mean, he probably stopped training. He probably quit the wrestling camp. Like, it's not going to happen for a while. And now all of a sudden on short notice, he's coming in. How's his gas tank? How's his wrestling defense? Usman is geared up to face a killer in Gilbert Burns, and he's on a full fight camp, training at elevation. I mean, he's going to be on point and ready to go here. And they talk about the adjustments for like the stylistic matchup and things like that. Usman's just got to go to basics. To me, that's a key in his pocket, is that this is a bad matchup for Masvidal, and Usman has wrestled his entire life. All he's got to do is go to the takedown in this fight. If he gets clipped by one shot and gets a little hurt, gets a little wobbled, takedown. It's that simple. So yeah. I think that Usman's going to have that to fall back on, and the fact that his gas tank is unreal and he's legitimately prepped for a 25-minute fight already. I think that that'll wear on someone like Masvidal, who probably is going to have a rough weight cut coming in late. He knows he's going to need to get it done early, more often than not to get it done at all. So I think Usman stays safe in the first round or two and just kind of blankets him. And then when he's a little less dangerous, I wouldn't be shocked if Usman kind of like almost ground and pounds him out in the later rounds when Masvidal just doesn't have as much to give. But you're right. He's got everything to lose. And when you've got that caged animal coming here on short notice with nothing to lose, that's dangerous, extremely dangerous. Well, I think that'll do it. We went through the entire card. I want to say a big thank you to James for joining us here on the show, and welcome to the Odds team. Looking forward to the content you're bringing here with us. That'll wrap it up, man. Is there anything that you want to shout out? Anybody you want to, talk to, give your handle? The floor is yours.
Well, first off, thank you for having me on. This is a lot of fun. I always like talking fights, and I love talking with someone like yourself who's very technical. I've always said this on my show. I'm more of a stats guy, and you're more, it's always refreshing to talk to someone who's very technical, who watches a lot of the tape. So it's always very nice to do that. So honestly, thank you so much for having me on. Everyone can follow me on Twitter and on Instagram at Lynch on Sports, the same handle, and subscribe to my YouTube channel, youtube.com/Lynch on Sports. It's where I do all the pros picks. Some of my interviews are going to live there. Interview clips, Q&As, things like that. I'm still going to try and make the channel very viable. I got a bunch of outlets I'm working for now, but I will try and put all my content at least on the playlist there so you guys can see everything there. That's where you'll find all of my stuff coming up here, including here on Odds HQ. I got a lot of really cool stuff coming out. I'm going to be doing interviews, some video breakdowns, a couple articles, things like that. Really excited what's in store here. And couldn't think of a better way to kind of introduce myself to this audience than coming on your show, man. I really appreciate it.
Hey, my pleasure. It was a pleasure to have you. And I feel like I completely agree. When you've got a guy that's stats oriented and then a guy that, watches the fights, the puzzle piece kind of comes together for that. We cover both sides that you need to think about when it comes to betting. So love it. I feel like it went very well. Thank you so much for everybody tuning in. We've got 221 live viewers. So thank you all so much. We appreciate the love and support. James is our new guy. He's going to have content here at odds.com. So make sure you tune in. Good luck on all your action for the rest of this week. We will have some more stuff coming to you. I'll have my Total Madness coming out for next week's show, as always. And then Friday, I'll be doing my weigh-in recap after we get the ball rolling here for UFC 251. Lots of action coming up. Follow me over at Diehard MMA Pod. Make sure you subscribe to Odds HQ. Thanks again, everybody, and let's roll. If the end button would work.